There we go. That's about all the Buenos dias and gracias is about all the Spanish I know, so I apologize that I will be presenting in English today. But I'll try and speak slowly so that you guys can all understand everything, and I'll leave time for questions at the end. So my name's Pete. I'm one of the developer advocates on the Chrome team at Google. That means I get to work with folks like you who build great websites and build awesome experiences, whether that's in the Chrome Web Store, whether that's just on the Open Web platform, or whatever you're looking to do. There are so many great options. I'm kind of curious, before we get too far in, how many people have started playing with HTML5 today? That's fantastic. That's awesome. The plan for today is we're going to have a look at where HTML5 is, because you're going to hear a lot of people say all sorts of different kinds of things. We're going to have a look at the things that are good to go, the things that you can use today and not worry about. Like you can just be like, hey, I want to go use this. I'm ready. It's ready. We're all good to go there. We'll have a look at some of the things that sort of fall under the use with caution, right? You can use it. You just have to be aware of how you're using it. We'll look at a couple of the things that Ernest talked about earlier, if you were in his earlier session. Things that you can use, but they might not work on all your browsers or anything like that. And then finally, we'll talk about some of the tools that will help to make your life easier as you're developing for HTML5. So if we take a look at the state of HTML5 today, there's so much that's come online, and there's so much support from all of the browsers, whether that's looking at Chrome or Firefox or Safari or Opera. Any of the browsers really have fantastic support, and they're all getting better. If you think back to just 3 years ago, and you look at this chart, and I'm just going to stand in the middle of here. Like, each one of these colored parts is a different piece of HTML5. You know, there's not a lot of color to that chart, right? It's pretty boring. It's pretty unexciting. Fast forward just 3 years, and there's so much more available to us. You saw some of the demos this morning, but not just those kinds of things that are sort of really cutting edge. The OK Go music video you saw with the people in those teal unitard-like things that were kind of weird but really neat, that was all done with HTML5. We couldn't have done that a couple of years ago. So the question is, when can we start using it, right? Because there's still browsers that don't support it. There's still stuff that's not available. So when can we start using it? Today. There's a lot of stuff that we can start using today to make our lives and our applications much, much better. So how do you safely use it today, right? Because you can go and you can do a whole bunch of stuff, and, well, it won't work in all the browsers. And how many people only have to support one browser? If you only support one browser. Yeah, so one person, you're lucky. Can I be you? I want your job, right? Like, if you only have to support one browser, as long as it's not one particular browser, you've got an amazingly good job, right? But realistically, we all have to support probably, what? Chrome, Firefox, Safari, Opera, probably all the latest versions are there. So there's 4. You probably have to support IE9. You probably have to support IE8. 7, maybe. 6, well, maybe. You got a lot of things to support. So making sure that things work across the board is really important. And the way we do that is to use feature detection. Not using browser detection to say, hey, are you Chrome? Well, then if you're Chrome, I'm going to give you this set of features. What you do is you say, hey, browser, do you do, and ask for a specific thing. So for example, hey, browser, do you support post message? Yes. Okay, great. I'm going to use post messages for sending messages between windows. Or, hey, browser, do you support, let's see, what else can we talk about? Speech. Hey, do you support speech? Yes. Great. Let's use that. Video, HTML5 video, HTML5 audio. Asking the browser whether it supports something is the best way to go about it. And I'll talk about doing feature detection. How many people are using feature detection today? Are you? So a bunch of folks. How many people are doing browser detection? All right. So a bunch of folks. Now, it's something that works. But as you want to start adding the new features, as you start thinking about adding the stuff I'm going to talk about today, it's really important that you do it by feature detection, right? Because maybe one version of Chrome has it, maybe a version in the future does not. So using feature detection is the right thing to do. So you're using feature detection, right? Right? All right. All right. Awesome. So how do you do feature detection? Well, there's a lot of different ways. Modernizer, Ernest talked about it earlier, is probably my favorite tool for doing feature detection. It's a relatively small library. You can't really see it there, but right up here it says the uncompressed version is 42K. And basically what it does is it gives you an API that you can call and say, hey, browser, do you support this feature? Hey, browser, do you support this feature? So not just for stuff that you might call with JavaScript, but it also tells you whether things are supported in CSS. So you can find out if a browser will support rounded corners, or gradients, or transforms, or transitions. So all of those things are available to you through Modernizer. You can get it at Modernizer, spelled without that E on the end. By the way, these slides will be available after the presentation. I'll give you the link, and I'll also tweet it after the presentation. So don't worry about writing any of these crazy things down as we're going through. All right? So how about older browsers? Oh, I gave it away. Oh, darn. All right. So I asked this morning, yesterday, how you say polyfill in Spanish. Because you know when you've got like a hole in your wall or something like that and you got to patch it, right? Because your landlord is going to come in and they're going to charge you money or something like that? That's a polyfill. So you fill that hole, resnar, or hopefully I pronounced it somewhat okay. Polyfills are JavaScript libraries that allow you to actually go and they will fill in all of the support that may not be there. So say, for example, you've got somebody who's using a browser that doesn't support Canvas. Wouldn't it be nice if you could still use Canvas? Yeah, right? Well, with a Canvas polyfill, it'll go and it'll actually say, oh, hey, this browser doesn't support Canvas, so I'm going to use Flash instead. And it'll go and it'll use Flash, but as a developer, you don't know and you don't care that Flash is getting used. You just use the APIs exactly like you're used to using them. So a polyfill basically fills in the holes, makes it so that you don't have to care about whether a browser supports a particular feature or not. I'm going to just pull this site up real quick. So this site has a whole bunch of really great things. So there's polyfills for SVG, for Canvas, for web storage, for video. So there's lots of great polyfills that are available to you. All right. Okay, so let's talk about the stuff you can use today. Stuff you can use today falls into two categories. The first category, actually probably three categories. First category, you can use it, it just works, you don't have to worry about it, you're all good to go. It'll even work in like IE6. Okay? Second category, you can use it, but you probably should have a polyfill. All right? And that polyfill will make sure that it works in old browsers and in new browsers. And the third category is, you know what? If it doesn't work, Who cares? Probably nobody's going to notice. All right? And there are some cases where that's perfectly acceptable. So the first one we'll talk about is the new semantic tags, the new doc type, character sets, quotes, and more. You'll notice a couple of things. This is a perfectly valid HTML5 page. It's got the new doc type. All right? In all browsers, this will stick them into their most standards-compliant rendering mode. So you can start using that new doc type today, and that'll stick your page into it'll get you going on HTML5. You don't have to remember that really long URL anymore. Notice that I don't have quotes on any of these things, right? I've got class equals my class. I don't need a quote on that. If you're going to have multiple classes, though, you do need quotes, right? Here's another one that's kind of funky. Notice here I've got an input type equals text, required. There's a new set of attributes you can add to elements. These ones kind of screwed me up for the first probably half an hour that I actually was using it. So I will try and save you guys half an hour. I'll do it in 30 seconds. If you want to put a value there, you can. You can say required equals true. You can say required equals hi mom. The fact that required is there means the value is true. I'll say it again. The fact that required is there, the value is true. What happens if I put required equals false? Anybody want to shout something out? It's true. No matter what you put, you can put required equals false, and it's still going to be required. So I did that with controls on a video element. I said controls equals false, not expecting the controls to show up. Half an hour, I'm banging my head on my desk, trying to figure out why insert whatever word you want to choose. Why the heck are these controls showing up? They shouldn't be there. Because it's a binary attribute. Just the fact that it's there is good enough. Speech input. You saw Ernest talk about this one. This is one of these ones that if it doesn't really work, nobody's going to notice, right? Like if you've got a user who comes in on Safari or on Opera, and they don't notice that they can't use speech, but they can type in there, that's fine. So I'll try what Ernest did, and I'll go for burrito, because that one seemed to work for him. Let's see. All right, worked for me. Sweet. But then there's another set of things that also are really useful. And actually, this is kind of interesting. So when the event gets fired, you can see all of the results that come back. So you can find out what it thinks you might have said. It only has a 59% confidence rate that I said burrito. So I guess maybe I'm not rolling my R's enough, right? So you can find out what people might have said in addition to what they actually said. To add that, binary attribute again. x-webkit-speech. That easy. It'll just show up. You get that little microphone icon, and people go click on that. There's a bunch of new form elements. Again, these form elements are ones where if they're not supported in a browser, it doesn't really matter because you're just going to get a text box anyways. So I talked about required, right? So that's going to prevent the browser from submitting the form unless that field is filled out. There's an email input. The really cool thing that I like about these attributes is that if the browser doesn't support them, it just gives you a text box. Gee, email looks an awful lot like a text box to me, right? So no matter how you do it, it's just a text box. So you can put that on there. The place where this becomes amazingly useful is on mobile devices and on devices that are not your keyboard, not your laptop, where if you're going to go type an email address, I don't probably need all of the characters, but I really want to make sure that the @ sign is available to me without having to go to another keyboard menu. Date, a new input date time or date field so that you can go for dates. Ranges so that you can actually go and be like, hey, you know, I wanted a little dial to go back and forth to be able to select different values. Search, right? Notice how basically all I did is say type as search, and it gives me the same look and feel as on my Mac, right? So I've got the little search magnifying glass. It says search. I don't have to do any of that stuff. Telephone placeholders. You can also do this thing called patterns and put a regular expression in there. The regular expression will validate the user input, so you don't have to go and do it again multiple times. It'll do it before the form is submitted. Colors and numbers. So there's a bunch of new ones. And because they're just going to fail back to text boxes, hey, those just work. You can use those without any fallbacks or any polyfills. Web fonts. How many people like Comic Sans? Yeah, one person. Yeah. I really want a t-shirt that says, anything written in Comic Sans will be taken with the same amount of seriousness. Right? Like, I think that would be the most awesome t-shirt. But of course, it would have to be written in Comic Sans, right? If you want to use additional fonts on the web, you can now do that. There's a couple of ways you can do that. This is the most standards compliant way that you can do it that'll work in all the browsers. That first one there, the EOT, will give you IE6 to IE6 and below, and I think IE7 as well. This is another IE fix. WAF for the modern browsers. TrueType for some of the older older Firefoxes. And SVG, which is a super tiny way of doing fonts that works really well on mobile Safari, so on iPhone and iOS. And so sure enough, there's my good font, or the good dog regular. You can get any font you want. I will ask, please, don't go crazy with this, because too many fonts makes it really hard to read things, right? Pick a couple of fonts that work really well. The Google API Fonts Library, really great place to go and look for stuff like that. Data attributes. If you want to put data on elements, so if you want to store additional stuff, like in the past you might have used maybe a hidden form element where you put some data in there, or maybe you use something like the session state or something like that. That allows you to put information on the page. Sure enough, so I've got data double equals rainbow, and data freak equals out. So sure enough, when you run that, you get double rainbow, freak out. Geolocation, another one that you can use. Geolocation, this one requires a polyfill, so you'll need to use a polyfill to get this to work. But if you use that polyfill, you can figure out where the user is. Right? So in this particular case, I can go click on Show Position, and sure enough, well, it tells me I'm within 18 kilometers. It could probably do a little bit better, but here's the thing. Because this device doesn't have a GPS in it, and it's kind of got to guess where I am, it's using that polyfill, we're not going to get quite as accurate of a result. If you try this same thing on a mobile device, or on a device that does have GPS and all of that, you'll get a more accurate result. All right, so let's hop into the proceed with caution section. So these are the ones that you can use, all right, but you need to be a little bit careful with them because they might not work, or maybe it will actually cause a not so great user experience, right? With those last ones I talked about, they're not going to affect the user experience all that much. The first one is Canvas. How many people have played with Canvas? Okay, a couple of folks. Canvas is a really great 2D drawing surface. It allows you to draw pixels on the screen, right? If you really wanted to be kind of crazy, and I'll put this out there as a challenge, you could probably rewrite Photoshop in Canvas. Be a little slow. But you could do it, okay? So Canvas allows you to draw pixels on the screen. It's a one-time drawing, right? So once you put that pixel on the screen, the browser forgets that that pixel's there. So unlike an element, you can't say, oh, hey, I want to go move that pixel. I want to move that line. I want to change the color of that line, right? You can do all of that with elements. You can do all of that with SVG. With Canvas, you're just drawing pixels. So the first thing I do is I say Canvas context document, get an element by ID, Canvas, right? And you can see Canvas. I've got my Canvas defined up there. And get the context, get the 2D context so that you can start drawing on there. And then I go and do a couple of things. I say fill rectangle, and that goes and just draws this wonderful black rectangle. Oh, yay. All right. And then I want to draw a line, so we say begin path, and we say arc, the width, how we want the end cap to be, whether we want it to be round or square or whatever. All right. And then you just say stroke, and that goes and draws a line. That's a really, really simple example. Canvas can do so much more than just that. The opportunities with Canvas are pretty huge. The fallback for Canvas, you saw earlier when I was going through some of the polyfills, they are there. You'll take a little bit of a performance hit, all right? But that performance hit, depending on the kind of graphics that you want to draw and what you want to do, may be worth it. Because Canvas really gets in and does some beautiful stuff. Web storage. How many of you have ever tried to store data on your user's computer? What? A couple of folks? Yeah. And you know, the only real way to do it today is to use cookies. And, well, as soon as you use cookies, what, you get 4K, maybe. And every time you make a web request, that 4K goes back and forth, right? That means web request that you make gets really, really, really expensive because you got to send 4K there and 4K back. You got multiple cookies, you send multiple 4Ks, like for every single request. That's painful. With web storage, you can actually store data on the user's computer. It's typically up to about 5 megs, so name value pairs. And there's two options. You can use either session state or local storage. Session state goes away when the session closes. So it's good if you want maybe a shopping cart and you want to keep what they want to buy. But local storage is good if you want to keep longer term stuff. Maybe you're building a game of Scrabble and you want to keep the dictionary on the user's computer. So you might store that inside local storage. So I can type, oh, that wasn't what I wanted. So I can go type here, hello. Yeah, hello. There we go. So I'll click save. If I reload this page, you can see that it came back 2.48, or it was saved 2 seconds ago. So that way you can go and just get that information just by using set item and get item. Gradients is another one. Gradients is one of those things that's crazy powerful. How many of you ever tried to do a gradient in Photoshop? How many of you enjoyed that process of creating a gradient in Photoshop? Right. Those of you who did, you're crazy. I try Photoshop and I get lost here and there, and but I can write lines of code. I can't make a color go from one to another, but I can write lines of code. And so with a gradient, you can do that really easily. There's two options. You can either do a linear gradient or a radial gradient. And linear obviously goes, in in a straight line. And you can choose the direction. I just chose straight up and from top to bottom, but you can go on a 45-degree angle. You can even choose the specific angle you want to go. Radial gradients allow you to get that same look and feel as well, where you can change the size of the circle that you've got. You can make it into an oval or in any direction you want. The reason why I put gradients into the sort of use with caution is because right now, to actually do gradients across all the browsers consistently, you need about 8 lines of code. Because there's the old way that WebKit did it, which was before it got standardized. Then there's the new way WebKit does it, which is the standard. All of them are vendor prefixed. So you've got to do WebKit twice, Firefox twice because they did it in an old way before it got standardized. You got to do one for Opera, one for new versions of Internet Explorer, and there's a bunch of other ones that you need to do as well. So it's a real sort of like, all right, just be careful with that one because it can get a little hairy. This one, though, is my favorite thing to play with in the world. I want people to play with this one a lot more. Transitions and transforms. How many people are familiar with transitions and transforms? Okay, so a few. Here's what I love about transitions and transforms. You can make things animate in, animate out, so I come off this and it goes away, whoop, right? I come back on it. So to get this to happen, I've got a div there, and I say the left margin is 2100 pixels. So I move it way the heck over, right? And then I say a transform, scale 0.5. Make it smaller, make it half the size. And transition, so again, these are vendor prefixed. So I got to say all, which means anything that I change when I add a new class to this, I want you to just make that happen gradually over 800 milliseconds and use the ease in function. So that goes slow, fast, slow, all right? Then when I hover over it, I want to set the margin left to auto, and I want to scale to 1.0, right? So as soon as I come off this, you'll notice it'll go down to the half size, and it'll move over to the left. Whoop. Whoop. Now, unfortunately, the sound effects are me, but you could get those to happen if you really wanted, right? This is really great if you've got like maybe a feedback box that you want to put off to the side, right? Or if you've got some components that users don't really need to see a lot of, but you want to show them a little bit. Application cache is another really interesting one, and it's one that I would encourage you guys to go look at. Not because it gives you an offline experience, but because it gives you crazy performance enhancements. Wouldn't it be nice if, when somebody loaded your website, instead of having to download every single component every single time, they just pulled them locally off their computer out of the cache, right? Then there's no network latency. Done. Files are just loaded immediately like that. That's what application cache does. It lets you say, hey, I want these files to sit on the user's computer all the time. I don't want them ever to go away. So with those, you can quickly and easily get in and be good to go and not have to do anything. So how do you do it? HTML manifest cache equals app cache. All right, so you just go put the app cache in there, and then you need to build an app cache file. This is what tells the browser what files to store. Cache manifest always has to be first. Then you need a version number. All right, the version number, the way that the browser says, oh, should I go get new files or not, is by looking for these files to change. And then you just list off all of the files that you want it to go load. And by saying network star, you're just going to say, hey, anything you don't get from the network, or anything you don't get from the cache, pull from the network. So things to use at your own risk. IndexedDB, if you're trying to do any database stuff, stay away from WebSQL unless you have a very specific use for it. WebSQL is going away. All right, it's been deprecated by the W3C and being replaced by IndexedDB. The one caution I'll give you on IndexedDB is you start looking at it, everything uses callbacks and is asynchronous. So you may think you have data, but you may not because the callback hasn't fired yet. So everything has to go into callbacks. When I first started playing with it, wow, I was banging my head against the wall for probably about a week trying to get my demo app to work. Web workers, another really cool one, right? How often have you seen that, like, hey, your browser's stuck, show up? Web workers, you start a worker, you put all the JavaScript you want in another file, and then you've got these to go. Tools and resources. Chrome Frame is a great tool if you want to make sure that your users are running the latest browser if they can install something else. So it installs into Internet Explorer and renders with Chrome even though you've got Internet Explorer running. Chrome Status, great site if you want to know what's implemented in Chrome and what version. Ernest mentioned Can I Use, another great site. HTML5 Rocks is a place where you can go and get developer sort of education. If you want to go learn about HTML5 stuff, either hit updates.html5rocks.com or html5rocks.com. There's a couple of resources here. Again, these slides are going to be up. I'm going to say thank you guys very much. I'll open it up. How many minutes do I have for questions? I have no minutes for questions. I'm going to stand either down here or outside if you'd like to come ask questions. Thank you, guys. I will tweet these slides out shortly, or you can get them at that URL. Thank you very much.
Muchas gracias. Bueno, como ya lo mencionó, pueden conseguir las diapositivas en esa dirección o directamente en @pitle. Ahí pueden seguirlo. Les invitamos por favor a salir del recinto. Vamos si quieren ingresar otra vez a la siguiente plática, por favor den la vuelta. Esto lo hacemos con el fin de que las personas que estén esperando también puedan tener la oportunidad de ingresar a la siguiente plática.
I was looking at that clock, thinking, oh, I'm at 30 minutes. I still got like